Tanto bene per tutti ragazzi, qui Mr. Frank, bentornati con questo nuovo video. Siamo qua nella fantastica Detroit al sole, sta arrivando un po' di nuvole ma poco importa. Siamo qui a Detroit per l'evento di PlayStation in merito a Detroit Become Human. Dunque iniziamo subito, quindi first question: how was being in the game? How different it is acting in a real world instead of like with motion capture and all this stuff?
Of course. Performance capture is so cool.
Yeah.
We record the facial animation, also the motion kit on the suit, as well as the voiceover on a microphone on our head. And this is much more like theater in a way, because we don't have a full set. Everything is very approximate, but then with the technology of being able to move and place the camera anywhere, they can...
There's a cinematic quality too.
Super cinematic. Yeah. And so on a film or a television set, there are many other things to concern ourselves with, sound, where the cameras are, but on the performance capture set, it's only about the acting. It's only about the moment to moment between the two actors.
Right. It places a lot of... It's a huge burden on the actor, I think.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a physical set.
Yeah.
Plus, as an actor, the first question you want to ask in a scene is, what's the backstory of this character?
Sure.
And where's this character going?
Right.
And in both cases, it depends.
Right. You don't know,
right?
It depends on the player.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm afraid to tell you, I got you dead.
I got you dead.
I'm sorry.
We're leaving.
Yeah, exactly. That won't happen. I couldn't save you, man. I'm sorry. Per chi non lo sapesse, tutto quanto il gioco è incentrato sulle scelte che il giocatore fa che portano a differenti esiti. So the game is based on player choices that lead to different paths. So how hard it is to create a story that can be told through many different ways.
I mean, there's a technical challenge in the sheer volume of storylines.
Sure.
I come from television where you have one version of a story. There's over 1,000 versions of the ending.
Yeah.
But more than the technical challenge, there's a kind of a psychological challenge you have to overcome as a writer, I think.
Sure.
Because in TV, your job is to tell a story.
Yeah.
In an interactive drama, your job is to let the player tell their story.
All right.
And so in that sense, you're giving the player the tools. I think there's a real analogy with what you did, Bryan, in your performance, in that you were giving the player as many versions of Connor as he needed to create his own one.
So it's very, very dynamic narrative throughout the whole story. So the other question is, since it's so dynamic, how was it to like have different versions of Connor based on the choices you had to make?
Fun.
How did you get into the character, basically? And
sure,
in a character that was evolving, not the same throughout the whole story.
Of course. Traditionally, when you build up to the climax of a story, you're telling one story with one ending. And here, with so many different endings, I had to imagine as if there were all of these different backstories, like Adam said. And so for me, I had images of, particularly when it comes to protests, you have people on one side of a protest line where they might have flowers in their hair or put a flower in the gun. And they're saying love is the only option. We're chaotic, we move, we're free, we have thoughts and feelings and hopes. And then you have on the other side, you have someone with a shield and they have a helmet down, and it does not matter what you say to them, their order is to hold this line.
Right.
And so for me, it was about finding the spectrum between these two extremes.
Okay. For the other characters as well, I mean, they're very different between them. So I mean, it was basically 3 different separate stories with 3 different characters, basically all of them evolving throughout the story. How was it to like merge them together into this whole storyline?
There are 3 plots do interweave as the game goes on.
Yeah.
And the choices you make as one character can affect the storyline of another.
Sure. Yeah.
But even before their plots are connected, they're really connected thematically.
Okay.
In that we knew we wanted to do this story about this deviancy crisis. What happens if machines start wanting to be human? And the idea was, how can we offer the player as many different perspectives on our central question as possible?
Sure.
So the choices he makes as one character, he reconsiders when he plays as another.
All right.
So Bryan plays a character who's working with the humans, whose job is to hunt deviants down.
Yeah.
So his perspective on deviants is very different to that of Marcus, who's a powerful deviant and is responsible for the deviants doing well and feels the weight of leadership.
Sure.
And that's different again to Kara, who experiences the society from underneath.
Connor, Marcus, and Kara are effectively a similar networked character, and Benjamin broke it down to me that Connor is the mind, Kara is the heart, and Marcus is the gut.
Okay.
When you just know something. And so in this way they create one entity.
Yeah.
I think that's very insightful, because somehow the whole story only emerges from the 3 characters interacting with each other. And when you lose a playable character, which you can, I mean, you can actually lose all the playable characters before the end of the story. When you lose a playable character, the complexion of the story changes dramatically because you lose one of these perspectives of the story.
Stay on camera, my friend.
Have I strayed out of shot?
I think we're actually done. So thank you very much for your time, guys.
Hey,
it's been a pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. Siamo qui adesso con Philip, il compositore di una delle parti della soundtrack per Detroit che riguarda la porzione di Kara, uno dei protagonisti, e pertanto andremo a chiedergli alcune domande più specifiche sul modo in cui viene composta tutta una soundtrack e molto altro ancora. Quindi iniziamo subito. Working on composing a soundtrack, I think is really mind-blowing because you have to create a support to the story that with music gets whole different. Like without music you can't get all the feelings you get.
Yeah.
So how was it to create the story and to tell an intimate story? I think Carol, like the piece you played for us before, it was really intimate with the feeling. And so how was it to compose such a soundtrack, but with the mind of a futuristic world? I mean, does this contrast of like something very familiar but in the future? Is it this contrast? How does that work?
Well, when I started writing, so I was writing the theme of Kara, and when I started writing, I was thinking, well, it's going to have electronics in it, it's going to be very mechanical, and from that I'm going to try and get some feeling. And then I realised the more that I wrote, the more organic it was becoming, and the more human it was becoming, and I started taking the electronics out and writing more strings in until I ended up with about 60 string instruments on it, and all the electronic sounds were actually being done on the strings as well. For me, the challenge was making the idea of an android, of an artificial intelligence, go from being mechanical to having that feeling, but also to becoming a mother. To becoming protective, and from going from a domestic scene to a big outdoors, scary, challenging scene. So it was all of those things, but really the difficult thing was actually finding a very simple tune, like 2 notes, that then can become 55 different pieces of music through the game. So
the core part.
Exactly.
Since the soundtrack is divided between different composers, I think that he has to get a really good connection between all of you to get an organic feeling throughout the whole game. So how was it the cooperation?
Well, when we started writing, we all thought that we were going to get together and write in a studio, but actually I think Quantic Dream and David and the composers, we realised it was better if we kind of fully developed our own themes almost in isolation. And then at the end they start to kind of wrap together. And that was a surprise for all of us, I think. But what was good is the fact that we could easily hear how the themes would be linking, even though we weren't working together. Because then I think what happens is you end up becoming much more that character that you're writing. We all got quite emotional about our characters and about the place. So that's the connection, really. You know.
And we talked about strings, and how did you pick strings? I mean, why the choice of strings instead of something else?
I play the cello, so that's a good start. But also, it's my even when I write for full orchestra, for me, the violin is probably my favourite instrument, followed by the piano. I love the cello, but you know, I write for where I hear voices. So Kara's voice actually sat on the cello for me. I can show you if you like.
Definitely.
So her theme is just two notes. And it's her name, so it's Kara. And then you just repeat it, so and then you take it for a walk. So but that fits over. So I wrote this when I was in a cabin in the woods, not the movie, but when I was in a cabin trying to come up with a tune, and I'd lit a fire, and I love fire. And I was looking at it, and suddenly I could hear like the fire making these notes, and it sounded like this. wrote itself.
I mean, yeah.
It did, because I just took the fire and then I just took that two-note thing.
Yeah, I think you're just being quite modest.
No,
it's really
true.
beautiful. Yeah.
But then the funny thing is, once you've got those notes, it can be anything. It can be heavy metal, or it can be kind of, you know. It's just as long as you've got the chords and the notes, they can be anything else.
Yeah.
You know. But
that was really, really great. I mean, soundtrack to me is like half of the work.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the storytelling has to be great, or sure,
Yeah.
but without music, it's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So, I got another question, but I quickly forgot because the music was so good. I got lost in my thoughts. So, when you got to know you were to develop the soundtrack for Kara, did you like think of the connection for music with the character, or you focused mainly on the events that were going on in Kara's life?
no, I funnily enough, with this one, I started from kind of inside her head. So like, what would it sound like in her head, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Like, and so at first I was writing all of these mechanical things, and then once she has a conscience and starts to feel and starts to question, you can kind of work from what that would feel like inside. So it wasn't really the environment, it was much more how would I, if I was that character, react in that environment. So it's like I'm going to be protective of a child, for instance, or I'm going to be scared of that that freeway or whatever. You know, it was more that, not the freeway.
Yeah.
But it was like I'm seeing it from her eyes as just like, well, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
Right.
So like literally like a personal connection for the music and the character. Great.
Exactly.
How did you approach that? Like you were in this cabin in the woods and by yourself, so just focusing on how to get how did the thing come up? Like from the fire, right?
But I wrote loads so I have this idea that if I try and write 50 things, one of them might be good, but I'm good at writing a lot, but then I'm good at editing. So I'm good at saying that's terrible, that's really molto terrible, like get rid of it. And then but this feels like it has something. So I would just write a lot and use a cello, write it down by hand. The last thing I did was go to a computer. Okay. But once I had it, I was like, let's go crazy with this, and then put it into an orchestra. Okay. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much for your time. It's been a
Grazie
pleasure.
mille.
Thank you. Siamo qui adesso con David Cage, che è il capo di Quantic Dream, lo studio che ha sviluppato a Detroit, Become Human. E thank you for your time, David.
Thank you.
E siamo qui allora a chiedergli alcuni aspetti proprio fondamentali del gioco. Iniziamo, so from Fahrenheit to Heavy Rain to Beyond, and now Detroit, you have explored many genres and many different stories. Could you give us some insight on the creative process that led you to starting a new storytelling in the future? Why this futuristic Detroit, and why this setting in specific?
Well, everything started with a short that we created in 2012 that was initially just a technical prototype. It was called Kara. It was 5 minutes long, and it was about the story of this young female android coming to life. And it was just a technical prototype. I had no plan to make it a game. But then we worked on another game called Beyond, and then when we had to think about what else we wanted to work on, the story came back, and we thought, okay, we need to revisit this character, and we need to imagine what happens after the end of the short. And that's pretty much how everything started. And we didn't want to create a game that would be sci-fi, because we didn't want to be too far in the future. So we thought that 20 years from now was the right, time, but also that Detroit was the perfect place to tell the story, and that's how everything started.
All right. And so this kind of futuristic ambientation with the androids and all that stuff. I mean, there's plenty of narrative from movies to books that cover the story, and this development has lasted 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. So in this time, many movies and many books have come out. Did you get any insight from these kind of other works, or you just go straight forward through your path?
Honestly, not really. When I started talking to my team about the story of Detroit, some people raised that, is it going to be like iRobot, or is it going to be like Asimov? And I said, no, that's not what I have in mind. I'm really interested in the human aspect of the story more than talking about AI or technology. And since I started working on Detroit, I pretty much stopped watching anything else. So
Okay.
I usually, you know, stay in my bubble and stay focused on what I'm doing. I tend not to watch TV anymore or watch films because I don't want to be influenced.
All right.
So I basically really told the story I had to tell, and hoping that it would be, of course, different from things out there. But I think we have something that is pretty different because it's much more about human beings.
Yeah.
It's much more about ourselves than about AI or technology.
Yeah, so this topic of storytelling is my next question. So, like, from a technical point of view, the game is impeccable. Like, graphics is amazing. The soundtrack as well is very, I mean, stunning. And so, in this context, how important gets storytelling as well? Because you can get a great game with, I mean, great visuals, great audio, but the storytelling has to have a greater part, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. In a story-driven experience, the story has to work, and it's not just one story has to work. It's all possible stories.
Sure.
Because the key pillar of the experience is really to let the player tell his own story through his choices and through gameplay. It was not about telling the story through cutscenes, which wouldn't make any sense.
Sure.
You're in control of the characters all the time, and you interact with your environment and with other characters, and through your decisions you tell your story. So that was something absolutely critical. The other aspect was that we wanted as many branches and as many possibilities in the game than we could. So we tracked a total of maybe 65,000 variables and conditions across the game, and we tried to give consequences to everything you do. We track, of course, your actions and give them consequences. Sometimes there are short-term consequences. Sometimes what you do at the beginning of the game can have a very significant impact near the end of the game. So you need to be careful about everything. But in matter of storytelling, it was important for us to create this huge tree structure so the player would really have this feeling of being in control of the destinies of the three characters.
Yeah, so and with these many opportunities, the player can replay the game and have a whole different story from time to time. I mean,
absolutely, and this is also why at the end of each scene we show the flow charts. There's a screen where you can see the tree structure and you can see the path that you followed in the story, but also all the branches that you have not unlocked. So the idea is really to show you, to tell the player, look at all the things that you have not seen in this scene.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And from a technical point of view, let's why the choice of I mean, staying with PlayStation and not going somewhere else? I feel like it's a great console. But why from a developer point of view? I mean.
Well, we have a very long relationship with Sony. We work with them exclusively for almost 12 years. It's been a fantastic, collaboration with them so far. First of all, because of the hardware, the console is absolutely splendid, and it's a pleasure to work on it. But also because of the people. I mean, they give us a lot of creative freedom, and they let us do games that maybe other publishers wouldn't let us do. So for Detroit, again, we had the time we needed, we had the resources and support that we needed, but also we had the creative freedom that was absolutely necessary to create an experience like Detroit.
Looking back at Beyond, like the storytelling there was really great, with the human aspect maybe in some portions of the game being more relevant than other portions, like when Jodie is homeless, for instance. There is a very emotional sequence. Can we expect something of that kind, like more in the game in Detroit, or like is it more fast-paced action? I feel like Kara is the most intimate character that you can play throughout the game.
Yeah, because we have three characters, each one has a different style and color, and we wanted these three components to create a richer story-driven experience. So Marcus is probably the one that will have the most leadership and get you this epic feel about leading a revolution. Connor will be this investigator, being really machine, being really cold and trying to accomplish his mission. And Kara is probably the most emotional of the three characters. But you will find emotions in all three.
In all the three.
And
Alright.
I can't tell you too much.
No, of course. We'll just have to play the game and replay the game to find out.
Absolutely.
Ok, so I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Grazie a tutti per la visione, lasciate un pollice in su e ci vediamo con un prossimo video.